Welcome to the tour of the cell. Today, we will be exploring the cell and examining each of the organelles. I will name several parts you don't know, but don't worry, I will explain each of them. We will be looking at an animal cell. Some organelles are found only in the animal cell, and some organelles are only found in the plant cell. First up is the cell membrane. The cell membrane is the organelle that supports and protects the cell. It is what regulates the movement of material in and out of the cell. The cell membrane is made up of a double-layered sheet called a lipid bilayer, protein channels that help charged and larger materials through, and carbohydrate chains. There are two types of transport through the membrane: active transport and passive transport. Active transport requires energy from the cell. Passive transport requires no energy from the cell. Let us now journey straight to the brain of the cell. This organelle is the nucleus. The job of the nucleus is to control most of the processes of the cell. It also contains the hereditary information of the DNA. We will now move a little deeper into the nucleus to the nucleolus. The nucleolus is where the assembly of ribosomes begins. Continuing our journey through the nucleus of the cell, we will find chromatin. They are basically DNA bound to protein. We should now commence moving outward to the endoplasmic reticulum, or ER for short. The endoplasmic reticulum is the organelle that is responsible for assembling components of the cell membrane, and it is where some proteins are modified. First, we shall examine the rough ER. The rough ER is identified by this name because it is studded with ribosomes. New proteins move from ribosomes to the rough ER, where they can be chemically modified. Next is the smooth ER. The smooth ER has no ribosomes on its surface. This part of the endoplasmic reticulum contains collections of enzymes that perform special tasks. Next up is the ribosome. Ribosomes are very small particles that are made up of RNA and proteins. Although they are very small, they have one of the most important jobs of the cell. That job is the production of proteins. They follow coded instructions that come directly from the nucleus. Our next organelle that we shall encounter is the Golgi apparatus. What is that? Well, I'll tell you. It's a stack of membranes where enzymes attach carbohydrates and lipids to proteins. From there, they are sent off to their final destinations. The Golgi apparatus is basically the sorter of the cell. We are now going to look at the centrioles. Don't bother looking for these organelles in a plant cell. You sure won't find them there. This is because they are found only in the animal cell. These consist of microtubules in a 9+0 arrangement and are involved in cell division. Remember those microtubules in the centrioles? Well, let's examine some. They are hollow tubes of protein that are about 25 nanometers in diameter. Now that's small. These serve as a sort of track along which organelles are moved. How's about we move on to the microfilaments? The microfilaments are large, thin fibers that function in movement as well as support within the cell. Our next organelle is the vesicle. This organelle is a membrane-bounded sac that stores and transports substance throughout the cell. Now we will examine the vacuoles. They are sac-like structures that have the job of storing materials such as water, carbohydrates, salts, and proteins. The pressure of the vacuoles in the plant cell allow the plant to support heavy structures such as leaves and flowers. We have now made it to the powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria. This organelle uses energy from food to make high-energy compounds that are used by the cell for growth, development, and movement. Next, we move on to the lysosome. One job of the lysosome is to break down proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates from food into particles. These particles will be used for the rest of the cell. Another function of this organelle is to help break down organelles in the cell that have outlived their usefulness. One more vital function that the lysosome performs is the removal of debris that would clutter up the cell. Now, let's examine one of the organelles responsible for movement. The cilia are located outside of the cell. There are hundreds of these hair-like structures that are on the cell. The other organelle that helps move the cell is the flagella. A cell can have only one or two of these long-tipped flagella. The cell that you see before you is not an animal cell. It is a plant cell. There are some organelles that are only found in plant cells. These organelles are the cell wall and chloroplast. The cell wall is the organelle on the plant cell that provides supports and protection. The other organelle, the chloroplast, is used for providing energy from sunlight to make energy-rich food molecules. The name for this process is called photosynthesis. Now, it is time to find our final organelle. Do you think you can find it? Well, you should. It's been right here in front of you the whole time, and it takes up most of the space of the cell. It is the material inside the cell membrane that holds the other organelles. This organelle is called cytoplasm. Finally, before we end our journey, we shall discuss cell theory. Cell theory states 3 characteristics of a cell. These characteristics are: all living things are composed of cells. Cells are the basic unit of structure and function in living things. And finally, new cells are produced from existing cells. Now, you know key features, characteristics, and the organelles of the cell.